Welcome back to Cheyenne, Wyoming Urban Gardener. This is part 2 of the video, just an update on the garden, having a little talking about the season, how it's been. And we're in Garden Zone 5A, 5B, so if you're wondering, well, we're beginning in the middle, go back and look for the part 1 of this video. Our potatoes are doing amazing out here. We are starting to get some dieback on the Cannabac vines. We haven't had a lot of dieback yet on the Yukon Golds, however, and that's because they're more shaded. So it looks like they might actually bloom again. They've bloomed actually twice this season. So as you can see, they're starting to die back on the Kennebecs. We'll probably be digging these sometime in mid-September. We're going to leave them until then just to make sure that the tubers are nice and big, the potatoes. And our spaghetti squash vine is climbing out like crazy and still blooming, still producing some spaghetti squash, and we'll keep. So we're basically hand pollinating. We haven't had enough pollinators this season. And another look at that teddy bear sunflower. Isn't it gorgeous? Just gorgeous. And I'll show you some white and purple ones here in just a moment. I believe I promised that in another video and I missed it somehow. We've got some new herbs that we planted. We just replaced. These are cilantro. We've got some oregano in there. And our parsley. Look at the size of those tomatoes in there. So happy about the tomatoes this season, even if they're struggling a little. And we planted cucumbers at the base of all of the tomatoes over here. We've got the red pear tomato right here, Cherokee purple, and the Jubilee. So we planted cucumbers at the base of each one of these, as well as our marigolds. And those are starting to bloom and produce right now. So you can see all the blooms, and they are climbing the cages, which is exactly what we want. And I think these are parade cucumbers. So we'll see how they do. And then our newer tomato plants are continuing to get bigger. They're really putting on speed of how big they're getting, how quickly. This was the speckled Roma over here, which is far exceeding the other ones. And I think the other ones, I do not remember which ones that I planted for these. We'll find out, I guess, when they start producing. But this is a speckled Roma. And we did plant some more seeds in our seed container over here. Just a few. I've got a couple of peppermint in there, spearmint, and some lavender. And you can see another cucumber coming up at the base of this tomatillo over here in the grow bags. That is a parade cucumber, I believe, or maybe an early fortune. One of the two. Both of them get ready at about the same time. And this tomatillo is just now starting to produce. And it is tall, guys. Like this guy is far exceeding the height of the regular tomatillos that we have already. And this was a super sauce tomato, and it has suffered in all of the hail and everything. Just not doing well. So unfortunately, it looks like we'll have small tomatoes on that one. And these are our other eggplants. And they are producing. We have a couple of eggplants that are sitting on the vines. It's kind of hard to get in there and see them. But here is one. But these guys are huge. These eggplants are topping 3 feet tall right now. And they're just huge. And then we have a couple more cucumbers over here. And I believe these are parade cucumbers. They are also starting to produce. Right there you can see. And our cherry tomatoes that we have are doing really well. And I believe these are the Tiny Tim cherry tomatoes, and They are very flavorful, but you have to wait until they are just dead ripe. I've noticed that if they're not just dead ripe, then they're kind of tart. And the comparison, I guess, after many years of dealing with tomatoes and eating tomatoes, is I used to think these were one of the best, and now I don't anymore. I actually think there's a lot of tomatoes varieties out there that are a lot better. So we have those cherry tomatoes. Our Lemon Boy tomatoes pretty much died off from all the hail damage and the cool and the wets. So all we have left are these Lemon Boy tomatoes. And as you can see, they are just so damaged. They are pretty much just the stems alive at this point. That's just sustaining those tomatoes to finish them on out. And they're starting to turn color, so they'll get mature here in a moment, in a very short amount of time. We have had worlds of beans. Like I said, we've had 3 half-bushel baskets full of beans, and we're still picking them. We still have them blooming. We still have them producing. We've had a couple of them die off. Nothing really serious, or just a few leaves that have died off or yellowed. And that's just because it's towards the end of the season for them, and they're just about done. So whatever beans that we have on here for this round, we will pick about half of them, and the other half we will leave for seeds. And again, these are the Rattlesnake pole beans, Kentucky Wonder pole beans. We have Half Runners, Royal Burgundy bush beans, Contender, Provider bush beans, and Early Serve bush beans, and Triumph de Farcy, which was a French variety of a filet bean. And it has actually turned out to produce quite a lot of beans. You see those beautiful beans in there. And the blooms, all of the blooms on these beans have been so gorgeous. The Kentucky Wonder pole beans are white, but the Rattlesnake pole beans are purple blooms. And the Half Runners are yellow. And some of the other beans are, like the Royal Burgundy bush beans, are a really deep purple. And some of the other ones are just different colors and pinks, and just beautiful blooms, as well as having the beans. And here's our 22 in-ground tomato plants that we had this season. These are Kellogg's Breakfast Tomatoes, Black Creme, and a couple other varieties that we're not sure of at this point anymore, because these were the second run or backup tomatoes for any of the ones that were in containers in case they didn't make it. So we just threw these in the soil, hoped for the best. We really didn't even have the room, but we just kind of threw them in there just to see how they would do, and they've actually have done better than the ones in containers. And always before every season I have complained about the in-ground tomatoes not doing as well. But these have done better than the ones in containers, and it's just because they have a little bit more shelter from the hail. I think the hail has done more damage than anything else in the garden, and this kind of proves it. So these guys are producing, they're blooming, they're lush, they're green, and yes, they have had a little hail damage, but nothing significant in comparison. We've got nice large tomatoes on these. Some of them are probably a pound and a half, and go down from there. And then we've had squash coming in from our gray zucchinis. Our gray zucchinis have done better than our dark green zucchini or Black Beauty zucchini. So these have been producing pretty well. They had started out kind of slow, and then now have started picking up on producing squash. So we are starting to have quite a few summer squash coming in, as well as some yellow straight neck squash. We planted yellow straight neck and saffron straight neck squash. And we've gotten a little bit of both, but it has not been as good a season as it has ever been for squash for us. We did throw the last of our celery into this section over here, which has started to finally pick up and start taking off. So all in all, I think we've ended up with somewhere near 50 celery plants. And then you can see our spaghetti squash spilling over into this side as well. It's starting to take off everywhere, and it's setting fruit like crazy. And then we have a second run of peas in here. We just basically planted 2 rows of peas on both sides, and the second row was a little bit more staggered in, basically it was a few weeks behind the others, so they are just now starting to produce. So these peas will be left for seed for the most part. Just depends on how many that we get for seed versus how many that we're going to pick for fresh eating or shelling. These are first 13 peas, and then we have some Cascadias in there just to fill it out because we didn't have enough for another run all the way around, but for most of the way it's first 13s. So these peas have been fantastic. We've had peas going into the freezer, which is good, to last us through the winter. Our onion harvest was not fantastic. They were not very big. We had a couple of them that were nice size, but otherwise just decent onions. We still have some candy onions in here that are getting ready. And we had a couple of volunteer chives come up, and one of them is starting to bloom. Actually, a couple of them are starting to bloom. But we'll have some candy onions here. They're starting to get a little bit bigger. And then we went ahead and planted some radishes through here, and which are looking quite nice. This is only after about a week of growth. So hopefully we'll have some radishes in here. And we did plant some sage in here as well, some broadleaf sage, which is just kind of starting to come up. It takes a little bit longer. And look at our beautiful zinnias over here that are bloomed. These are volunteer zinnias from last season. And we have a couple of nasturtiums in here that are blooming. And we had a yellow dahlia over here that's just been filled with blooms through most of July. And then we had more potatoes over here in this little section and the cement, and they have been doing very, very well. A lot better than the potatoes in the main garden. So they are starting to die back now. You can see a little die back on them. They were a couple of weeks behind the others. And then we have some red curry squash in here. You can see the vine is just getting crazy long. And we have a Boston marrow in here, and they've kind of intermingled. This is the Boston marrow, and then this is the red curry. You can see a hi, happy bumblebee. Glad to see you. So there's another red curry. And the vines have kind of went over top of the corn. Our corn is not the best in the world, but we do have some ears in here that'll look quite nice. Again, too cool, too wet. We had issues with pollination because of the lack of pollinators, as well as when these guys were going to tassel and they started producing pollen, we had so much rain it was just washing it off. So we had a lot of issues with pollination this season with the corn. We did have a lot of double ears on the corn. And this is the early Sunglow hybrid. We do have a yellow straight neck squash in here as well, which just now started to produce. Looks like we got one in there to pick. Again, we had a lot of not pollinated even squash, and that's what prevented or slowed down the season quite a bit. Looks like we got a couple more red curry in here hanging in different places. They're a little bit too small for you to see, but they're just getting started. Our hanging baskets are looking fantastic still. They've been kind of sheltered by this tree. And we have sunflowers that are about 12 feet tall or taller. I think we've got one topping out almost 15 feet tall. But lots of colors. We have the autumn beauties in there. We've got incredible sunflowers and mammoth sunflowers and lemon something sunflowers, which are a lot different in color. Just glorious sunflowers. The living fence was definitely a beautiful thing this season to take away from how bad the garden had been doing for a while. We did end up with a mulberry tree. Look at that. It was given to me because we were giving out plants and things at the beginning of the season, and she brought me a mulberry tree, and very happy with that. Had been looking for a mulberry tree. Our rhubarb is coming back out again. We had taken out all the stalks that had died back, and it just started popping out leaves like crazy, and that just happened yesterday. And then we've got a couple of red curry squash in here that are just starting to bloom. They'll start running very soon. We've got some pumpkins in here along the fence. This is along the fence in the front of the house. And we have some borage in here that's blooming. We have some pumpkins in here that are setting on vines. You can see that one there. And another one right there. And we have rattlesnake pole beans all along the fence, as well as Kentucky Wonder pole beans. The Kentucky Wonders are a little bit behind the rattlesnake pole beans, but they are starting to run, bloom, and will start producing soon. The rattlesnake pole beans are already producing. They just started a couple days ago, and already the beans are just about picking size. And they are growing out and over the top of the fence. But lots of beans in there, intermingled with some bells. So looking forward to those. Still lots of blooming on the squash because, again, the squash were behind. A little slow this season because of all the cool and the wet. You can see those beans there. More oregano. The oregano hasn't been great because of how cool and how wet it's been. And you can see this vine here just going on out the other way. We have some more red curry squash over here across the walkway in front of the house. So it looks like we have two right there. And I think there is a third one. There's a fourth one. So they're finally starting to pick up and grow. Looks like that one just got pollinated. Oh, here's another one. And here are the beautiful white and purple sunflowers. They're not very big. They're a dwarf variety. But look at those blooms. And we have another one here getting ready to bloom. And again, our hanging baskets back here, still looking beautiful. They're actually starting to come back out even more. And we have a yellow, I think those are snapdragons over there, a dwarf variety. And we have some acorn squash that's setting in here. There you can see that one. So hopefully we'll get more soon because acorn squash is a little temperamental to me because they need a lot of heat. And we had some yellow straight neck squash over here. We have harvested some and they are still producing. So you can see those down in there. And then we have some Idaho russet potatoes over here that we had planted just from sprouted potatoes in the house. And they actually have some pretty nice sized potatoes on them. We have gotten down in here and taken a look at them. And then we had some broccoli back here, but I don't think the broccoli is going to do anything because it's just too shaded. And we had a tree take over, so I'm going to have to get in there and pull that out. We have harvested some of the beets. We had some really nice sized beets. And our Swiss chard is now starting to put some leaves on again, since it has cooled off a bit in here. So new leaves, and looks like some new leaves for the beets as well. They looked pretty rough. They still look pretty rough, but they are starting to get some new leaves on them. So hopefully we'll have some leaves here to harvest, because this variety of Swiss chard was amazing. And here is another big sunflower. And our parsnips in here are starting to get ready. We pulled one a couple days ago and it was pretty decently sized. And we have harvested carrots. We've had some carrots that we've harvested that have been very, very big. We had some purples and some oranges and some yellows and some whites, and they were all nicely sized carrots. And then we still got some more carrots in there that are getting pretty large. And we're just going to keep them in there until the end, very, very end of the season, harvest them then to see just how big they get. We've got rutabagas in here that are pretty nice already. And we've harvested some cabbages. We still have some cabbages to harvest. And we still have the mammoth red cabbage. Let me see if I can climb over into the garden and we'll take a look at those. It's a little difficult now that everything has gotten so big. So you can see we have still some Danish ball head cabbages to harvest. But here is the mammoth red rock cabbage. These guys are supposed to get huge. I don't know how big we will be able to get it before the season runs out on us, but it is massive in comparison, as you can see, with the Danish ball head cabbage. The size of the plant is just enormous. It just started making a head a couple of weeks ago, and look at that head already. It's already about the size of the Danish ball head, and it just started, and you can see there's still a lot more curling. I don't know if we'll have any Brussels sprouts this year. We're going to leave them until much later in the season just to see if they will finish on out when it gets a lot cooler. We have a stonehead cabbage over here that's looking very nice. It's about the size of the mammoth red rock, so hopefully we'll have a massive cabbage head on that guy. And then we have a little Danish ball head over here that was smaller than the other ones, but still producing a head. Still has a long way to go. And then we actually have 8 red acre cabbage over there. Just really difficult to see right now. And then we have purple broccoli right here, the large plants that you see. They have not started producing yet, but it should be time soon for them to start producing. Let me see if you can see the red acres. There they are. They're starting to head. Kind of hard to see them. And then you can see another view of the spaghetti squash over there. There's 2 spaghetti squash over there, and then a couple of other squash varieties that I don't even remember at this point that are over there and should start producing soon. And then we are still picking lettuce, even though our lettuce looks not that great. Still really tasty. We've still been picking on it. And our parsley is going to seed over here. That parsley is now 8 years old. And then we did plant some Napa cabbage right here. And they are getting a lot of pest pressure, and I knew that. I've grown Napa cabbage before, and I've never liked the amount of pest pressure that they get. And then we had some more celery that we stuck over here, and it is starting to get pretty massive pretty quickly. And there's another view of the rutabagas. Let me see if I can climb back out of the garden. It gets kind of difficult again when everything is getting pretty good sized. All of our herbs are still doing really great. We had harvested quite a bit from the herbs already. I have a thyme over here that we need to harvest. And then I need to pull it out of the vines and get it somewhere else because it's going to get completely covered in vines. And that is from the red curry. And our mustard is going to seed, so we need to get on that. And then we had some more peas in here, and they're actually producing, but there's not very many of them. They got a lot of hail damage. And we had a bunch of flowers over here, edging, and they are just now starting to bloom because they were pretty shaded over here. We have calendula all along this area. And we had some bachelor buttons in here as well. And some zinnias and things like that. We do have another round of beets that we planted right through here. It's kind of hard to see them. That just started coming up not long ago. A lot of this stuff got hail damaged. You can see the lilies are just laying over. We do have some sunflowers in here that are starting to head up and bloom. Cucumbers in here that are starting to produce, but a lot of them were hail damaged till they were nearly severed. You can see a vine there with a break in it, but they're still producing and still alive. This one did get broken. We have our daikon radishes in a hugelkultur right back there. And they are doing really, really well. They'll take a while longer before they'll be ready. We have some more sage that we planted right here. And you can see it's doing pretty nicely. And here's some of our bachelor buttons that are still hanging on with blooming. They had already bloomed. Some of them are really dark in color, which I've never seen that dark a color before. And then we have some more squash over here. Some zucchini. They are starting to produce. And we have some Boston marrow over here. I'm not sure they'll have enough time. And then we had our other strawberries over here, and we just let them recover because they had a really bad winter. We had a winter where we had a couple of weeks of -20s and -30s. And they really suffered. We had a lot of them die off in this particular kiddie pool, but we had enough in here left that with their runners, they have already replenished themselves. And here's another bachelor button, and this one has a lot of different colors all on one plant. Pretty unusual. We have some more cucumbers over here. Again, hail damage. Some more squash over here. And another cucumber here. And another cucumber here. And then all along the fence, in this area, we had squash and sunflowers. The sunflowers are getting ready to bloom. The squash are just now starting to produce because it is shaded over here. It is the north side. So you can see these are starting to bloom. These are all dwarf varieties of sunflowers. Perhaps multicolored. And that is not a ladybug. I think this is one of those invasive look-alike bugs that looks like a ladybug, but that's not. So I will need to take care of that here in just a moment. You can see some of these starting to bloom. We do have some cucumbers in here as well, but they are being a lot slower to do anything, and I'm not sure they'll have time. Here's one blooming. And as you can see, we do have some squash in here. We did plant butternut and honey nut over here, but I don't think it's going to have time. I've always had trouble with any butternut variety here. That's a Boston Marrow. So it's yet to be seen, but I don't think we'll have enough time for anything to be produced. It is starting to bloom. This is the honey nut here, and there's a couple more of them over there and there. So anyway, that is the garden this season. Just a little bit of a talk about what all is going on with the season. So I hope everybody loved the videos. If you did, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for notices on new videos as they come out. And we'll see you in the next one.